find yourself noticing common storylines or tropes being used across multiple different series? No? Just me? Well, that tracks. Anyway, today we're diving into 3 different sci-fi shows: Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Netflix original Black Mirror, and Sci-Fi Channel's The Ark, to see how each one of these handles a common trope that I myself see used in a lot of different sci-fi stories. 2 characters trapped together in an impossible, seemingly inescapable situation, forced to rely on one another and ending up in a romance that likely could never have happened under normal circumstances otherwise. Before we proceed, it should be known that there will be spoilers for Black Mirror Season 7, Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 2, and The Ark Season 2. What I like about all 3 of these examples that I'm about to talk about is watching these relationships form with the characters born directly from the circumstance they find themselves in. The fact that they wouldn't have otherwise come together in this way is something that I really like about all of these stories, and that each story ends with the relationship ultimately not being able to continue between each of these sets of characters for various science fiction reasons: temporal mechanics, death, pre-existing tension, dynamics upon return, and of course time travel and technology. Another common thread to note with all of these examples is that each of the central characters the stories focus on do ultimately still have a direct connection to the other character in some way after they overcome the challenge or escape, but outside of the circumstances that brought them together, the relationships that they formed in these situations can't continue. First, let's talk about Star Trek Strange New Worlds, the episode Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. Here's the initial setup. A dying temporal agent hurls La'an Noonien Singh into an alternate timeline, complete with its own Captain Kirk, and then both of them get sent back even further in time with a device that we'll call the recall device. This device actually gets stuck until they complete their mission, which is to stop a looming temporal disaster, and they cannot go back until this is done. Up until this point, you literally see that La'an is someone who normally keeps her guard up. But in this situation, she finds herself sharing intimate secrets and these small moments with this version of Kirk that she's met. The forced isolation and this ticking clock of the ever-looming threat really breaks down her walls, and ultimately they fall for each other throughout these stolen hours, if you will. Once the mission does succeed, this version of Kirk ultimately does die, and La'an is able to return to her time, retaining all the memories of everything that happened. But for temporal Starfleet reasons, she can no longer talk about it. She's not able to share this experience with anyone, and while she does have a Captain Kirk, obviously, in her timeline that she can talk to and does at the end of this episode, she can never talk about their time together because he is not aware of it, because this is a different Captain Kirk, and again, for temporal Starfleet reasons, she cannot talk about any of the events that transpired. Then we move on to the Black Mirror episode, Hotel Reverie. We have our central character, Brandy Friday, who has agreed to be a part of a recreation of a 1940s movie called Hotel Reverie through the use of this technology that will place them in a environment where she become the main character, and then playing along all the other characters who are generated by the computer program. In order for her to exit the program safely, they have to complete the full narrative of the movie set in place. As they're doing this, a glitch happens and the whole world basically freezes, and Brandy becomes trapped in there with just her and this AI program of Clara/Dorothy Chambers, the actress, are the only 2 beings in this virtual world that are not affected by this. Everyone else around them is essentially paused. Even though the narrative and all the other characters are paused, time is still passing, and as simulated days turn into years, Brandy and Clara/Dorothy Chambers actually forge a genuine emotional connection outside of the story that Brandy agreed to be a part of, in this isolated lockdown VR world, they actually grow to fall in love with each other and forge a very deep connection. When the glitch is finally fixed and the program is able to resume the narrative and then eventually complete the narrative, Clara's memory actually completely resets and she reverts back to this one-dimensional movie character and essentially forgets about all of her time spent with Brandy up until that. And then, near the end of the narrative, Brandy actually ends up exiting pretty much completely heartbroken because Clara dies unexpectedly, again through the results of the changes that happened to the original narrative set in place. At the end of the episode, after Brandy is safely out and the movie is completed, another character who works for this company that's doing the movie called Redream, seemingly moved, yes, by how much Brandy grieved over Clara's death, even though it was all VR, actually ends up providing her with this landline-esque phone that she is able to use to call another program of Clara/Dorothy Chambers. But this is a program taken from a different point where they're essentially using these like audition tapes that Dorothy Chambers had done in the 1940s. And Brandy is able to interact with Clara/Dorothy again, but she doesn't retain any of the memories of their shared time together. So while this seems to comfort Brandy, ultimately they aren't able to have the same relationship they had. We land on the Arc episode entitled It Should Have Been You. The setup is a catastrophic FTL drive, faster than light, malfunction knocks our central character, Captain Garnett, and another character who's a cadet named Ian, into a shared coma-like dream. In this dream world, it feels like decades are passing by for them, where in reality it's only hours in real time as the rest of the crew works to wake them up out of this coma. In this dream world and the dream time that's passing, Garnett and Ian grow old together, side by side, as they work to first figure out what's going on and then kind of just keep each other sane. They form a bond that really becomes very deep between the two, that ultimately almost ends up holding them in this dream world and actually makes it harder for their crew on the outside to wake them up and get them out of it. This love is really actually unlikely because in the episode really right before this, what happens is another character named Spencer is actually set up to be Ian's clone/twin. It's kind of convoluted, so you really just need to watch the whole show, but Spencer dies as him and Garnett were actually forging their own romance of their own after pretty much being rivals up until this point. So as a result of that happening, before they're knocked into this dream world, Garnett is not even able to look at Ian because when she looks at Ian, all she can think of is the death of her friend Spencer. Ultimately, Garnett and Ian and the crew outside trying to wake them up realize that Ian and Garnett have to die in this dream world in order for them to be fully pulled back out. When this does happen, they obviously wake up back in their normal age and in their normal time, but all their memories are intact. And this again makes it a tad awkward because even though it feels like years, decades even have passed for them, it's really only been about 36 hours. So as they wake up, the death of Spencer is still fresh in Garnett's mind, and ultimately this relationship they formed as a need for survival in this dream coma world where they were the only two people on board the entire ship, it ultimately can't continue in the same way that they left off because of these unresolved feelings that Garnett has with the death of Ian's twin and her position as the captain of the ship. Now let's talk about how each show kind of approaches this same trope. Again, two characters that in normal circumstances would not end up in a romantic entanglement, being forced into it out of a circumstance where they're in a situation that's inescapable or a challenge they have to overcome. Obviously, Star Trek Strange New Worlds approaches this from a more classic kind of, time travel, temporal, wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey kind of angle. And then Black Mirror, in true Black Mirror fashion, ultimately approaches this from a technological standpoint, kind of a commentary on the film industry and where AI and VR technology are affecting that long term. And then we have the arc, who kind of just takes a more emotional approach, really focusing on the relationship that is formed and why it can't continue afterward. And then as far as, what actually gets them in that situation, it's not so much anything related to time travel or specific technology related around a VR environment. It's a kind of a classic trope that is used in Star Trek, but in the arc, it's a malfunction with their FTL drive. And then some magnetic technology on board that results in this dream shared coma that they end up in. Then we gotta mention, how the characters fall in love within each story and the differences there. Obviously, in Strange New Worlds, it's a high-stakes mission that La'an and Kirk are on. This kind of forces them to kind of break down their walls with each other, and they already kind of had a natural connection, even from the first moment that La'an appears on the bridge of this alternate Enterprise. Then, when it comes to Black Mirror, it's a situation where they're forced together with an endless amount of time, and is also really centered, the love kind of forms because Brandy, the main character, Brandy Friday, kind of already has this personal fascination with the movie Hotel Reverie and the person that portrays Clara in the 1940s, Dorothy Chamber. And then in the arc, they're kind of forced to kind of rely on each other because of this situation they're put in. They're in this vast empty ship, no one else but themselves, trying to figure out if it's in an alternate reality, if they went through a wormhole. Basically, their mental sanity and survival depended on relying on each other, and that blossomed into this bromance between Garnet and Ian. And then ultimately, the differences within each story as to why the relationship can't continue. In Star Trek Strange New Worlds, this version of Kirk actually ends up getting killed, and even if he hadn't gotten killed, his timeline was going to be erased if the mission was completed successfully, which it does, and it does happen. So La'an is not able to talk about this going forward, and even though she is able to interact with her timeline's Kirk, she has no way to share this experience with him. Then, of course, in Black Mirror, the relationship cannot continue after Brandy is able to finish the narrative and escape the VR world, because obviously Clara/Dorothy Chambers is an AI program based on an actress from the 1940s. So even as Brandy returns to the real world, that person is long since dead, and technically Clara is a fictional character. And again, even though Brandy is given that phone that she is able to use to call Clara and still talk to her, or Dorothy Chambers, from the audition tape, they can't actually continue their relationship in the same way due to that physical barrier of Clara/Dorothy Chambers only existing in a digital environment. And then with the arc, Ian and Garnet's relationship cannot continue the same way that it was in this dream-like world they were trapped in, because technically they died to escape this dream state, and so that life essentially died with them, again because of the existing dynamics between them before they entered this dream state, with Ian being a clone/twin of Garnet's best friend Spencer, and someone that she had actually grown feelings for before his death. So due to their complicated dynamics and the nature of the world that brought them together in the first place, their relationship cannot continue as it was in their coma world. So yeah, I just think it's really cool that we can take this same premise and trope, and 3 different sci-fi series can take it and put their own unique spin and perspective on it, and we don't just get the same story told the same way 3 different times. Because on paper it could very much seem like, hey, these showrunners and these writers were copying each other, but they take this very common and popular trope that is again used in a lot of other science fiction and even other Star Trek episodes. I just chose this episode specifically because it's one of my favorites of Strange New Worlds lately. So yeah, it's just really cool to see a popular and common trope be used in different ways across different series that are similar and are all science fiction, but all kind of bring their own perspective and storytelling. So that's gonna about do us for today. Just wanted to talk about all three of those examples and how they took that and kind of did their own thing with it. Have you seen either of these shows? If not, you should. Star Trek obviously is one of my favorites. Talk about it a lot on this channel. Black Mirror is phenomenal if you're a fan of science fiction or horror. It's an anthology series, so each episode gives you something different. And then again, I have also talked about The Ark on this channel as well, so please go give that show a watch as well if you're a fan of Star Trek or any other science fiction that deals with space exploration and intense crew dynamics in a survival setting for humanity. All of the shows are great. Star Trek is streaming on Paramount Plus in the US. Black Mirror is a Netflix original, and The Ark is a Syfy channel original that is currently streaming on Peacock here in the US. So if you watched any of those, go ahead and give me your thoughts in the comments below. And if you liked this video, give it a like, subscribe, share, follow along. I'll be doing more stuff like this. We got science fiction commentary, Star Trek videos, memes. Sometimes I talk about heavy music. We got a little bit of everything here. With that said, I'll catch you in the next one, and keep looking to the stars.